I never thought I'd be the type to pour my personal life out into the open, especially something this ugly. But here I am, sharing my story, because I don't want anyone else to go through what I've gone through. The name's Adam. I'm 35 years old, and I've been married to Rachel for 10 years. A full decade. 10 years with a woman I met back in college. Looking back on it now, it feels like it happened in a completely different lifetime. Back then, Rachel was the kind of woman who could command an entire room with just her presence. She had this magnetic charm that made everyone gravitate toward her. She could light up a space just by walking into it, and people were drawn to her like moths to a flame. And me? I was just the lucky guy standing by her side, grinning like an idiot, wondering how I even managed to be with someone so amazing. To the outside world, we were the perfect couple. We had that picture-perfect marriage, the kind everyone else envied. Hell, I even convinced myself of it for a long time. We shared laughter, spontaneous nights out, and quiet evenings just enjoying each other's company. That's what marriage was supposed to look like, right? But as the years went by, life starts to settle into routines. You build your life together, fall into familiar patterns, and you assume everything will work out because, well, you've made it this far. But man, I should have seen the signs before it all fell apart. It wasn't some sudden, dramatic shift. It was more like a slow leak. It happened gradually, and I missed it. Looking back now, I can see all the little signs I ignored. There were those small, uncomfortable moments when something didn't feel quite right, but I convinced myself it was nothing. I didn't want to admit the truth. 10 years is a lot of time to just throw away, right? The first red flag was her work schedule. Rachel had always worked late, but recently, she was coming home later and later. First, I brushed it off. I'd ask her about it, and she'd offer the same tired excuses. Late meeting again, or Jason and I are working late on a project. Jason, that name. I can't even hear it without my blood boiling. But back then, I didn't think it meant anything. He was just a colleague, right? First, I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? But then the late nights kept happening, sometimes past midnight, and when she did come home, she wasn't the same. She was distant, like her mind was somewhere else, and I wasn't even in the room with her. We hardly spoke, and when we did, it was always the same boring, surface-level conversations. How was your day? That's it. Nothing deep. As for our intimacy, it was practically non-existent. We were more like roommates than husband and wife. We shared a bed, but it felt like there was a wall between us. I couldn't figure out why. I started doubting myself. Maybe I was overthinking things. Maybe work was just wearing her down. Maybe I wasn't doing enough to keep her happy. You can drive yourself crazy wondering about all the maybes. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to face it. Then came the day everything came crashing down. It was just another average afternoon. Nothing special. I was working from home, trying to clear up some files on the laptop we both used for work. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't looking for anything. But as I went through some folders, I stumbled across an email. The subject line seemed harmless enough, just some work-related nonsense. But for some reason, I clicked on it, and that's when my whole world changed. The email was from Jason, her colleague, but it wasn't about work. Not even close. The contents were explicit, graphic, to say the least. Romantic? Maybe, but mostly sexual. The kind of stuff you don't send to someone unless you're involved with them in a way you shouldn't be. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. He wasn't just a colleague, he was the guy. My wife had been cheating on me. The worst part? She didn't even try to hide it. I sat there, frozen, staring at the screen like it was some nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My mind was racing. My heart was pounding. And I felt this cold, dark anger creeping in. I wanted her to feel the exact same hurt I was feeling. I wanted her to hurt like I hurt. But I couldn't just explode. Not yet. If I was going to confront her, I needed more. I needed to know how deep this went, how long it had been going on. I couldn't just walk up to her with a single email and a pile of rage. So, I did what any guy would do when betrayal stabs you in the back. I started gathering evidence. I needed to see it all, every text, every call, every message, every secret. I had to know the entire truth, not just walk into a confrontation where she could talk her way out of it. So I installed spyware on her phone and email. I'm not proud of it, but at that point I didn't care. The trust was already gone. If she was going to betray me, I was going to know everything. The spyware showed me everything: texts, emails, phone calls. I could even listen in on her conversations if I wanted to. It was like watching a slow-motion disaster, unable to stop it. My marriage was crumbling right before my eyes. And from that moment on, I was living a double life. I kept acting like everything was normal, smiling, laughing, pretending nothing was wrong, while secretly monitoring the spyware. Every chance I got, I'd check it, watching her text Jason, making plans for their next meeting. I saw the flirty messages, the sexual emojis, the innuendos. It was like I was watching her fall in love with someone else, right in front of me, and I couldn't do a damn thing about it. The worst part? I had to keep pretending I didn't know. I'd sit across from her at dinner, listening to her talk about her long, exhausting day at work, while knowing every word that came out of her mouth was a lie. Felt like a knife twisting in my gut. But I wasn't ready to blow everything up just yet. This was only the beginning. I'm not sharing this to get sympathy. I'm sharing it because I know there are guys out there just like me, clueless, sitting on their couches while their wives are out there sleeping with someone else. Trust me, I didn't think this could happen to me, but it did. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. Once I started tracking Rachel's phone, it didn't take long for the full truth to come crashing down. This wasn't some isolated mistake or a one-off affair. No, this was a full-on betrayal, and it had been going on for over a year. A year. Can you even begin to wrap your mind around that? 12 months of lies, deceit, and betrayal, all right under my nose. And the worst part? They were experts at covering their tracks. This wasn't some random fling. They had an entire operation running smoothly, like a well-choreographed dance of deception. Thanks to the spyware, I learned they'd been meeting up in hotels during work trips and conferences. Sometimes they'd fly to different cities just to be together. And just to make things even worse, they had a secret bank account to fund their little affair. I watched in disbelief as they booked flights, hotel rooms, fancy dinners, things Rachel had never once mentioned to me. Not a word. The pain of finding all of this out is something I can barely put into words. It felt like someone had taken a knife, driven it into my chest, and twisted it over and over. But the worst part wasn't just the affair. It was the realization that this had been going on for so long. I felt like an absolute fool for not noticing sooner. But even though the rage inside me was burning, even though all I wanted to do was confront her and destroy everything, I knew I couldn't. Not yet. We had 2 little girls, Ella and Grace. They didn't deserve to be dragged into this nightmare. I had to be smart about it. I needed time to figure out my next move. Every time I looked at Rachel, I couldn't see anything but her betrayal. She tried so hard to act normal, tried to pretend nothing had changed, but I saw right through her. The guilt was practically dripping off her, and that's when it all started to make sense. She had been so cold, so distant because she was hiding something, and it wasn't just work. Every excuse she gave, "I'm just so stressed out from work," or "I'm just so tired," was just a load of nonsense. She wasn't stressed from work. She was stressed from living a double life, juggling everything and praying I wouldn't catch on. And it became clear to me, Jason wasn't just a fling. He was her way of filling the emptiness that I wasn't enough to fill anymore. That realization hit harder than the affair itself. I wasn't just being replaced physically. I was being replaced emotionally too. I wasn't enough for her. It felt like everything we had built together didn't matter anymore. She might have tried to pretend things were fine at home, but I could see it in her eyes. The cracks were there, the guilt was weighing on her, but she was too deep into this to turn back. But even with all of this weighing on me, I still wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I wanted to be smart about it. I needed to wait until I had all the power. I wasn't going to make a rash move, no shouting matches where she could turn things around and make me the bad guy. No. When I made my move, it was going to be decisive and final. In the meantime, I kept playing the role. The oblivious husband. For the kids, I helped Ella with her homework, took Grace to her soccer practices, did all the things I was supposed to do. I couldn't let them see the cracks in the foundation. Not yet. They were too young to understand the storm that was brewing, and I wasn't about to let Rachel's choices shatter their world. But it wasn't easy. With every passing day, it got harder to keep up the facade. Every time I saw Rachel on her phone, I knew exactly who she was texting. Every time she stayed late at work or went out with her friends, I knew where she was really going. And it ate me alive. I'd lie there in bed beside her, knowing she had just come home from spending time with another man, and I'd have to pretend everything was fine. It wasn't just the anger, it was the sheer betrayal. I had trusted her with everything. My heart, my life, our children. And in return, she was giving all of that to someone else. I could have confronted her right then, could have thrown everything in her face. But I didn't. I stayed silent. I needed more time. I had to be methodical. So I waited. I watched. I played the game. Every move Rachel made, I was there, keeping track, always one step ahead, gathering more evidence. She was digging her own hole, unaware of the storm that was about to hit her. She wasn't going to get away with this. When the time came, I was going to make her pay for every single lie, every secret, every moment she thought she had hidden from me. Once I made the decision to play the long game, I knew I couldn't let anything slip. Rachel had to believe she was still in control, that I was the clueless, unsuspecting husband. So I kept up the act. The loving, attentive husband who didn't suspect a thing. It wasn't easy, but I had to make it believable. I gave her the space she wanted, pretended that her late nights didn't bother me. I even started asking about her work, showing interest in her meetings, asking how things were going. Every time she looked me in the eye and lied, I smiled and nodded. But inside, it felt like I was feeding the fire that was burning me from the inside out. Still, I wasn't just sitting back, allowing her to think she was getting away with everything. Behind the scenes, I was making my own moves. I started quietly shifting money into a separate account. Small transfers, nothing that would raise red flags. I wasn't about to be left high and dry when everything came crashing down. I knew I'd need a financial cushion when I filed for divorce. While she thought she was living the carefree life, I was collecting evidence. Every text, every call, every last detail about her affair with Jason. I kept it all, screenshots, emails, even photos. I wasn't going to let her deny it when the time came. She wouldn't be able to spin her story, to manipulate the situation. I had all the proof and I was going to use it. One of the smartest things I did early on was hire a divorce lawyer. I spoke with him in secret, laid out everything that had happened, and he helped me create a strategy. It wasn't just about getting out of the marriage. It was about protecting myself. He helped me map out a plan, one that focused on timing. We agreed that we'd wait until everything was airtight, until I had everything I needed, before I dropped the divorce papers. When it came, it was going to blindside her. Here's where things started to get interesting. I knew Jason was married. His wife, Claire, had crossed my path a few times at school events, PTA meetings, the usual places. She seemed pleasant enough, but there was always something about her that felt distant. Who could blame her? She was married to a guy like Jason. I knew she deserved to know the truth, but I wasn't about to just drop a bomb on her without a plan. I needed to play this carefully. I needed her to be on my side. So, I started orchestrating playdates for our kids, Ella and Grace, with Claire's kids who went to the same school. At first, it was casual, just friendly chats while the kids played, small talk to build rapport. I wasn't rushing anything. I needed to earn her trust little by little. Slowly, I started dropping some subtle hints. Stuff like, Rachel's been staying late with Jason a lot recently. That must be hard on you. Or, it's funny how work always pulls people in different directions. Nothing blatant, just enough to make her think. I could see her mind working, even though she didn't say much. Before long, Claire started acting differently, suspicious, even. You could see it in the way she would check her phone when Jason wasn't around, or how her smile would vanish when I mentioned work. She was piecing it together, but she still needed confirmation. That's when I gave it to her, proof. I didn't overwhelm her, but I showed her just enough of what I had. Some texts between Rachel and Jason, a few suggestive messages, and plans for hotel meetups. I made sure not to dump everything on her at once, just enough to spark that confirmation in her mind. I'll never forget the way her face changed when she saw the evidence. The color drained from her face, and I could see the heartbreak hit her in waves. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She just froze, staring at the screen, her hands shaking. It was eerie. She whispered, but I didn't want to believe it. And honestly, I felt for her. I really did. I knew exactly what she was going through. Hell, I was living it. But there was another part of me, a cold and calculating side, that knew exactly what I was doing. Claire was going to be my ally, my secret weapon in this. Together, we were going to make sure Rachel and Jason paid the price for everything. I wasn't looking for a quick and clean break. That would have been too easy. No, I wanted them to feel every ounce of the pain they'd caused, to suffer the way I had. Exposing them, bringing the truth into the light, that was my real goal. Months of preparation led us to this moment. Claire and I had planned every move, every conversation, every tiny detail. We knew exactly how to proceed. Rachel and Jason thought they were still in the clear, that their affair was still a secret. But we were about to pull the rug out from under them, and once it was out, there'd be no turning back for either of them. It all came to a head on our anniversary. 10 years of marriage. 10 years I thought were real, meaningful, but now it all felt like it had been wasted. And Rachel didn't see it coming. I suggested we take a romantic weekend getaway. An opportunity to reconnect and try to salvage what we once had. I laid it on thick. Flowers, a sweet note, everything she'd expect. The moment I brought it up, I could see the guilt flicker in her eyes. She hesitated, probably trying to figure out how to manage both me and Jason that weekend. But in the end, she agreed. How could she turn down a husband eager to rekindle the romance? Meanwhile, Claire was making her own moves. She'd arranged for Jason to go on a business trip, something Rachel wouldn't bat an eye at. It was a perfect setup. Jason wouldn't have a clue. We picked a hotel close to where Rachel and Jason had been meeting before. A familiar place, one they'd visited multiple times. The stage was set. The night of the trip, everything fell into place. Rachel and I checked into the hotel, but I wasn't planning on spending a single minute with her. Claire and I had kept tabs on Jason and Rachel, so we knew exactly where they were heading. I made up an excuse about needing to take a work call and slipped out of the room. My heart was racing, but my mind was laser-focused. This was it. Claire was already waiting for me in the lobby. We exchanged a brief nod, both of us knowing what was about to unfold. We made our way to the room where Jason and Rachel were supposed to meet. My adrenaline was pumping, and my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from pure fury. All the months of pretending, while they lied and betrayed me, came down to this moment. Then we saw them. Rachel and Jason arrived separately, just as they always did. First Jason, then Rachel, sneaking into the hotel room like it was their secret hideout. They had no idea what was about to happen. Claire and I waited a few minutes, just long enough for them to drop their guard. Then, without warning, we burst into the room. The look on their faces was priceless. Rachel's eyes widened, her mouth opening and closing as if she couldn't find the words. Jason froze, completely stunned, not knowing how to react. They didn't even have time to cover up, to make up some excuse. It was a perfect snapshot of their pathetic secret life. Rachel's face drained of color as she realized the gig was up. But it was too late. I made sure the camera was rolling, capturing every moment. I kept my voice cold, detached as I spoke. Surprise. I've known everything, Rachel. I've known for a long time. She started stammering out excuses, but I wasn't listening. The time for lies was over. Her face went pale, her hands trembling. She couldn't even meet my gaze. And in that moment I knew I had her. The game was over. She was trapped and she knew it. There was no way out for her. Claire stood there, her face just as cold as mine. Jason, however, looked like a deer caught in headlights, his face full of disbelief. I honestly think he was more concerned about what Claire would do to him than the fact that I was standing there, recording everything. I made sure to get it all on tape. Every word, every reaction, every moment of their humiliation. Rachel could barely get a word out, And when she tried to explain herself, I cut her off with a sharp wave of my hand. "Save it," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "You don't get to explain anything." A strange sense of calm washed over me. All the fury, the heartache, the months of feeling betrayed, it all seemed to fade into the background. I had finally arrived at this moment, standing in the truth. And now that I had exposed them, I felt almost detached, like I was observing someone else's life fall apart. It was surreal. There were no screams,
no shouting,
just the cold, unforgiving reality of what they had done, laid bare in front of us. Rachel was frozen, unable to move, while Jason stuttered, scrambling for anything that might save them. But it was too late. Nothing they could say would change the fact that they had been caught. Claire and I walked out of the room in silence. We didn't need to stick around and watch them squirm for excuses or beg for forgiveness. We had achieved what we set out to do. The truth was out, and there was no denying it. We left the hotel, knowing this was just the beginning. The divorce was inevitable, and with the evidence I held, Rachel was cornered. But as I stepped away from that hotel room, I felt a strange sense of triumph. After everything, the lies, the deceit, the constant pretending, I knew it was only a matter of time before Rachel came back to me, begging to fix what she had destroyed. Sure enough, just a few days later, she showed up at my door, eyes swollen from crying, pleading for forgiveness. "Adam, please," she cried, standing there in the kitchen. The same place where we once shared simple conversations, laughs, and our dreams. Now it felt like a battlefield. It was a mistake. I wasn't thinking clearly. "I still love you. We can fix this." Her words fell flat, like echoes in an empty room. A mistake? A year of lies, secret trips, hidden hotel bookings, a separate bank account? That wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated betrayal. A deliberate choice to destroy everything we had. And love? Whatever was left of that had vanished the moment she chose someone else over me. I looked at her, my resolve hardening. "You didn't make a mistake, Rachel. You made a choice. Every time you met him, every lie you told, it was all a choice. You didn't love me then, and I don't believe you love me now." Her face crumbled as the guilt hit her, but I felt nothing.
no empathy, no sympathy.
I wasn't about to let her manipulate me back into her life with her tearful pleas and promises. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about closure, about making her confront the consequences of her actions. I pulled out the divorce papers I'd been holding on to for days, watching her face fall as she saw them. The shock in her eyes? It gave me a twisted sense of satisfaction. Disbelief and horror flashed across her features as she took them from me. I spoke calmly, but my words were final. "Sign them. It's over." She stared at the papers, her hands trembling, her voice weak with desperation. "Adam, please don't do this. We can fix it. I'll go to therapy. I'll do anything, just don't throw everything away." I shook my head, disgusted. "There's nothing left to fix. You destroyed our marriage, and I'm not interested in trying to rebuild what you've torn down." She didn't argue anymore. She stood there, clutching the papers like they were her lifeline. But I could see the realization in her eyes, the realization that she had lost everything. I turned my back and walked away from the kitchen, leaving her standing in the ruins of the life she had shattered. The fallout was swift. Claire didn't waste a second. She filed for divorce from Jason the very next day. The news spread quickly, and soon enough the entire community knew. Jason lost his job. The fallout from an affair with a colleague's wife doesn't bode well for your career. And as for Rachel, her reputation was in tatters. The friends she once relied on turned their backs on her. The whispers followed her everywhere. It was almost poetic. For so long, I had been the one humiliated, deceived, and betrayed. Now it was Rachel and Jason who were drowning in the shame they had brought on themselves. Their secret was exposed, and there was no escaping the fallout. But what mattered most to me wasn't the gossip or the damage to their reputations. It was Ella and Grace. I wouldn't let Rachel drag them into this mess. I had all the proof I needed to make sure I got full custody. When the court hearing came, the judge didn't hesitate. He awarded me full custody, citing Rachel's infidelity and lack of stability. The moment the judge read the decision, Rachel's face was etched with devastation. She had lost everything. Me, her standing in the community, and now even her children. But that was no longer my problem. I had fought for this and I had won. Now it was time to move forward. The divorce settlement went exactly as planned. I kept the house, the place where Ella and Grace had grown up, the place that still held the memories of a family that was now shattered. I walked away with primary custody, making sure my daughters stayed with me, away from the chaos Rachel had created. She was left with nothing, a small apartment and visitation rights. Everything she thought she would keep, she lost. It wasn't about the house or the money. It was about the fact that she had willingly thrown away everything she had for a meaningless affair. I had spent months preparing for this moment. Every step, every move had been carefully thought out to ensure I came out on top. And I did. Financially, I was stable. But emotionally, I had won in a way that meant far more. I didn't just survive the betrayal, I built a new life. Every choice I made, every piece of evidence I gathered, every decision led to this victory. I didn't have to pick up the pieces of a broken life. That was Rachel's burden now. She had isolated herself, ostracized herself, and now she was forced to live with the consequences of her choices. Jason was out of the picture, his life in ruins. He was nothing more than a passing distraction, a void she had tried to fill. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I had no regrets. The pain was real, but it fueled me to push forward. I focused on being the father Ella and Grace needed, the father they deserved. The time I spent with them became my purpose. Watching them grow, hearing their laughter, knowing they were safe and loved, that became everything. It was the redemption I sought, and in the end, it was all that mattered. For the first time in a long time, I finally began to trust myself again. Rachel's betrayal didn't crush me. It shaped me into something unrecognizable to the man I was before. I came out of that mess stronger, with my self-respect intact, something Rachel could never claim for herself. She had become a hollow version of the woman I once knew, desperately trying to rebuild a life she had torn apart on her own. When I look back, I realize my so-called revenge wasn't about destroying her. It was about reclaiming everything she tried to take from me, my sense of self-worth, my confidence, my future. By staying patient, focused, and sticking to a plan, I didn't just win the divorce. I won back my life. I proved to Rachel that her betrayal wasn't the end for me. It was the beginning of something far greater. I'm telling my story now, not to boast, but because I want others who might be going through similar pain to understand. You can come out the other side even stronger. Betrayal feels like it's going to crush you, like there's no way out. But if you stay sharp, keep your head clear, and don't let the anger swallow you whole, you can rebuild. You can rise again, just like I did. Rachel's downfall wasn't my victory. It was her own choice. I simply made sure she didn't drag me down with her. It's been a year since everything fell apart, and I thought it was time for an update. So much has changed, and to be honest, I never thought I'd be in such a good place after everything. If you had told me a year ago that I would emerge from all of this stronger, happier, and more at peace than I'd ever been, I probably would have laughed at you. But here I am, in a better place than I ever thought I would be. Once the dust settled, I focused all my energy on rebuilding my life, starting with being the best father I could be for Ella and Grace. And they're doing well. Way better than I ever expected, honestly. The transition's been smoother than I thought it would be, and staying in the family home has made it a lot easier for them to adjust. I've made sure they know, without a doubt, that they are loved and cared for no matter what. Rachel? Well, she's barely part of our lives anymore. She has visitation rights, but honestly, the relationship with the girls is strained at best. I don't try to push them in one direction or the other. I let them make up their own minds. Right now, they're not really interested in spending much time with her. I think they're still processing what happened. As for Rachel, from what I hear, she's been trying to pick up the pieces of her life, but it's been a struggle. She's still tangled in the aftermath of her affair, and it looks like she hasn't made much progress. As for me, I've kept moving forward. There were days when it felt like everything might break me, when I wasn't sure I'd ever feel normal again. But time has a way of healing. Slowly, I started to piece myself back together. I'm seeing someone now. Someone who's been exactly what I needed. It's been a few months, and it's been good. I won't go into details, but she's been a breath of fresh air in a life that had once felt suffocating. There's no drama, no secrets, just honesty and support. Work has been steady, and I've started focusing on what's next, both for me and the girls. We've already taken a trip to the beach, and watching them run around in the sand, laughing without a care in the world, was a moment I'll cherish forever. I'm determined to give them a childhood that's full of love and joy, one that's free from the weight of the past. Looking back, I don't regret how things turned out. In fact, if anything, I'm grateful for it all. That painful experience forced me to take a hard look at what really matters. Rachel's betrayal stung deeply, but it didn't define me. It gave me the chance to rebuild, and most importantly, to show my daughters that no matter how tough life gets, you can always rise above it. So yeah, I'm doing well. Better than I ever imagined I would a year ago. I'm grateful for everyone who's been a part of my journey and supported me through it all. It really meant more than you can know. And if you're reading this and going through something similar, just remember, things do get better. You just have to keep moving forward.